Sorry. As I was saying. We live in a really unique country. If you look at that map, you can even look at our global map. Well, we've got one of the biggest chunks of dirt. And by the way, it is also one of the most diversified chunks of dirt. There's only like, what, 2 countries that are larger, is that right? Russia and China, yeah. There's only 2 that are larger, but they have limited coastline. They're both kind of in like higher latitudes. Right, we've got everything from the Arctic Circle with Alaska all the way down to the tropics with Florida. Plus, within that generally temperate zone, we've got all these different elevations, west side of a continent and the east side of a continent. So we have like the marine layer influence and then the marine dump influence. We got grassland, desert, forest, we got all kinds of stuff. We happen to have what is probably, in my opinion, if you could just choose from the get-go, the best chunk on that map. If you ever played Risk, you would probably want to choose this one. I don't know how many of you were given the opportunity, but it's kind of lucky that we're here. That said, we moved into a country with all of this fantastic and majestic landscape a long time ago, and pretty much our whole plan when we Europeans got here, our whole plan was to take all this land and cut it up into little pieces that we were going to give to each of our people. Logan, put your phone away, or I break it on your feet. And you know, it was kind of late in the game that somebody said, well, at some point, we might want to set aside some land to stay beautiful or to stay productive for the long term. Because the land that I gave her, it's kind of used up, and the land I gave him, he mismanaged and it's on fire, and the land I gave him is now cities. So the United States got the idea right around that moment. You can tell when we had the idea. I always feel like the Europeans and people in charge or whatever hit the Rockies. They looked down the Continental Divide and the Pacific watershed and said, wait a minute, there's an ocean on the other side. We're going to run out. I don't know if you can tell, but the light blue is privately owned and the red is federal land. As a percentage of state land. So you can see we've chunked it up into private property from the original 13 colonies all the way to the Rockies. And when we hit the Rockies, we're like, whoa, we should probably preserve some. I'm skipping ahead. But for the last study goal in this unit, is that number 28 or something? 26? 26. We've set up different levels of federal protection. Not all federal land is the same. By the way, some of you might have heard this. I'm sorry to talk politics, but it's just kind of a funny fact to correct. Some of you might have heard that during our tragic fires, our president tweeted that we might be to blame for poorly managing our forests. Oh, yeah. There's a lot to say about forest management. I understand the point. I've already told you that we've mismanaged forests as a country. You know, because we put out all those fires and built up too much fuel. We've talked about that, right? But in terms of who manages California's forest, about 98% of California's forest is federally managed. And our most recent budget cut that funding. That's not a Republican thing. We've been cutting federal funding for land protection for about 100 years now, as long as we've had federal land. But first of all, cutting the funding doesn't help. Second of all, it's federally managed, except for like 2% of California's forests. Okay. What does it mean that the feds manage it? Well, there's different levels. For study goal number 26, we've got, watch this. First you look and then I'll talk. BLM, forest, national park, and within the national parks, we also have wilderness. I'd like to define what that is. BLM is land that's open economically. We, the American people, own that land, but we use that land for her logging company or her mining company or his petroleum extraction. BLM is owned by we the people, but you could say it's for business use. And you should know that. Almost all of that federal land is BLM. We don't have to spend a lot of money for that. We just need a few scientists and a few people to go out and map it or monitor it. But it's not meant for visitors. There's no road maintenance. BLM doesn't have like nice bathrooms. BLM doesn't have like fancy interpretive signage or whatever. BLM is just like for the companies to get what they need out of that. Then, one step up from that is national forest. Mostly national forest is for personal use. If you've ever driven up Highway 154, you go past a sign right after San Antonio Creek that says now entering Los Padres National Forest, and the motto of the U.S. National Forest Service, anybody know what that is? Land of many uses. It's utilitarian conservation. We want to use that. So the feds own it, but you're allowed to go fishing, and you're allowed to go hunting, and if you want to cut down some firewood, you can do that, and if you want to go shoot a buck, you can do that. The one thing that you cannot do is monetize it. You can't do that for a business, you can't do that for a business, you can't do that for a business, you can't do that for a business. So national forest is for personal use. Yeah.
Don't you need a permit to do that kind of stuff?
Of course, that's still regulated. So there's state and federal hunting, fishing, cutting down trees, ranging cattle, all that stuff. You're right. It's all regulated because, you know, it's government land. It's not like willy-nilly. You can do whatever you want. You know, we can't share without rules. Yeah.
You're allowed to hunt in Los Padres?
Absolutely.
Oh.
You hear what he said? There's rules about that? Okay, yeah. So if you know what you're doing, yes. Like, you're probably not allowed to go for it. If you didn't know the answer, not you. But yeah, I mean, if you go far enough from the road and you use the right type of ammunition and you're in season and you carry the permit, you have to know a lot of, it's pretty heavily regulated. But yeah, absolutely. I hunt national forest all the time. One step up from the U.S. Forest Service is the Park Service. National parks are no use. You don't get to take anything. You also don't get to leave anything. You might have heard of leave no trace ethic. In a national park, you're not even allowed to change it. So like rock climbers, putting bolts in the rock is like really tricky and very carefully regulated. You can't use any power tools back there. It's like national park is heavily protected. That's for all Americans, and by the way, all people of the world, to go and enjoy, but you're supposed to enjoy like this, without taking the deer, without catching the fish. It's for recreation only. And the only development inside a national park, the only impact, is just to help more people go. So roads and parking lots and bathrooms and picnic tables so that grandparents can go with their children to have a picnic, fine. But there's even one step of higher protection called wilderness. We'll get to that one another day. Bye.